I am not an expert on Appalachian music or Appalachian instruments. That was merely a marketing ploy to get you in here. I am 1/4 Appalachian. My father's, mother's people came from North Georgia, North Alabama, and Tennessee, and they moved off to Texas around 1900, and my grandmother was born there. But when I moved here, there were a lot of things that were just not alien because it was Sunday dinner at my grandmother's house. I have been fascinated with banjos since I was 5 years old. My dad drove a bread truck, and he was not particularly musical, although he had a good voice and he could play the harmonica. And one Saturday, he came home early, which he never did, and he had a brand new banjo in a case. And of course, the kids swarmed around. Oh my God, what is this thing? What is it? And I was like Stewie in Family Guy when his family moves to the South, and they're in the witness protection program, and Stewie, the little snobbish British child, sees the banjo the first time, and is, what is that heavenly instrument? I have never heard such dulcet tones. And then, of course, he learns to play the banjo, and there's the scene from Deliverance, and he sings, "My big old fat baby loves to eat." And I won't tell you the rhymes. So we were totally fascinated by this thing. He let each of us touch it and like pluck a string. And then my mother got angry that he brought home this banjo and God knows what it cost. And so he said he'd return it. So we all piled in the car, and it was hot, and there was no air conditioning, and it was a 57 Pontiac. Or maybe we started an awful Dodge with a metal hood on it that wouldn't let you see the drive-in from the back seat. And my dad took the thing back, but he came out with whistles for us, woo, whoop, woo. And I was making music. My brother was not making music, so I threw his out the window. He cried, and I had to give mine to him. And then he was like, and once he won the victory, I got it back, and I played music on mine. But I touched this banjo, and it was so neat. We never missed Hee Haw. We never missed Louisiana Hayride. We never missed the Grand Ole Opry. Part of my dad liked Bob, Bing Crosby, and he liked Dean Martin and all those people, and Connie Francis. But we all had to shut up for Hee Haw. And Roy Clark was on there, and String Bean, and sometime I remember seeing little Jimmy Dickens. His pants were way down here. He was way ahead of the times. And then somewhere around age 21 or so, I had a bad day with my girlfriend, and I was waiting for her to come back from the library, and somebody in the yard started playing dueling banjos in this hippie commune place. And I was like, oh, that's that sound, that banjo. And a year later, I bought a banjo, and I learned to play, and I had a friend play fiddle. We joined the Old Fiddlers Association in Texas and played, and then I hung around with a bunch of people in my 20s who played fiddle and banjo and guitar. And then I grew up, and then we didn't hang out on Friday anymore and drink beer because we couldn't afford a tea glass. And that's why I'm wearing this, because I got it for Christmas, and it's too pretty wearing. And she liked to make things, and see something, we can't afford that, let's make it. Yeah, let's go to Goodwill and see if we can find something to make it out of. And so we did, and I started with walking sticks and started selling them, and I thought, oh God, this becomes a state tax problem. I got to stop this. Just give you a walking stick if you want one. And I tried carving again, but you carve your hand and it sits on the shelf and it doesn't do anything. And then I said, ooh, I bet I could make a bow and arrow out of a hickory tree. So I cut down a hickory tree and made 3 bows out of it. And then it was like plump, plump, oh. From a bow to an instrument, there's a very small step. And so I said, I've always wanted a fretless banjo. I wonder if I can make one. Well, when I first started talking with Jeff about talking here, he said, why don't you come in and show everybody how to make a banjo? And I said, that requires like power tools and lost fingers. Okay? It would take too much time. But I said, I can show you how you make a banjo. Here is a neck I rejected from another project. I had marked it with a fret template, so I would know where the notes were, but I wanted a fretless banjo. And I went to cut this out, and it did not match that black ring right there, so I threw it in a pile. And I said, well, I'll use it for something. So here it is. If you have a stringed instrument that you can carry, which is not a piano, it generally has a neck, just a stick, okay? And on the stick there will be some way to make the strings tighter or looser, you know, like tuners. And here's that. Hand-carried string instruments have some sort of resonating chamber. Electric things don't have that. They have a big amplifier or a wall of amplifiers. A banjo basically has a drum. It was a cookie can from the Goodwill. It had a matching set that went inside, but it's basically a drum. By using a dowel and some screws, which is the right side. Must be this side. Yes. We can make a banjo in several minutes. Smoke a cigarette or something. Yeah, but this is not the best idea I've ever had, which is the biggest side. Let's see that. You can get your money back at the end. It works at home. Here we go. Instruments is like physically intensive. Okay, we got our dowel inserted. The reason we have a dowel is so the pressure the strings puts on the drum does not crush it. Okay, that little 4-string over there, I got it all together, and the wood started coming apart, so I had to buy an embroidery hoop and glue it on the bottom to hold it all together. At the other end of the banjo, we have something to hold the strings, which is a salad fork from Walmart.
We got $5 in that thing.
Yeah, this is it's about a $12 banjo, but she did find a whole banjo in a case for $12 at Goodwill. Okay, so far that worked. We are about to make music, my friends, on a 2-string banjo. And this started out as a stair railing from Home Depot. Actually, there's one stair railing. It's been cut and mutilated. And then there's another one under here. So, let us... Banjo's either 4-string or 5-string. This one's 2 strings. I've got a drone string. And I've got the power string.
What's the drone string?
You.
That's not me.
Oh, I don't have a banjo here. That one. It's what makes the banjo irritating to some people. Because it keeps hitting that extra string. I'm sure it drives like real musicians nuts, too. We've got to count 3, 5, 7, 10, 12. It doesn't matter for our purposes, but 5, 7, 10, 12. Close enough. The bridge could be a little higher. But anyway, that's all that goes into a musical instrument. Beyond that, it's skill and patience and whatnot. So my first attempt was to make something I always wanted, which was a fretless banjo. I used to go down to banjo.com in Kennesaw in the mall. It was the only mall I ever really liked to go to. There was a big banjo store with banjos costing into the thousands of dollars. They had a rocking chair and a braided rug and a bass was set up, and men escaping their wives and children could come in there and play music, and then they closed and moved to Alabama, okay? And so I don't go back to that mall. But they had some fretless banjos in there. I've been fascinated with fretless banjos forever because of Charlie Poole. He was active in the late 20s and early 30s in North Carolina and Virginia. And he played a fretless banjo. And I thought, man, I got to have one of those, but it was $2,300 at banjo.com. So I said, well, let me start with that. And so I made one for like $30. For the head, well, actually I spent more than that. Let's say $40. I found I don't know if that's goat hide or not. If you have goats, I'm sorry, but it's a tambourine. And when I got it all together, it just simply wasn't loud enough. And I don't have a resonator banjo in here except for this one, but a bluegrass banjo is not open in the back. It has a big, heavy piece of hardwood back here, or the one we got from Goodwill for $12. It's got a big piece of plastic back here. And it pushes all the sound forward. And so I found a salad bowl at the Goodwill, which was the same diameter as the tambourine. And so doing the most dangerous thing I've ever done, I took it to the table saw and held it and then cut it. Then I told her what I did. And it didn't quite fit, but that's why they make leather shoelaces and thumbtacks. And I needed a strap, so we went to Goodwill. We found a leather, well, actually from bow making, I needed an arm guard made out of leather, laced up like a Viking. And but I had a strap from a briefcase, leather briefcase we got for like absolutely nothing there. I learned that nylon strings are really hard to work with. And even if they call themselves Nilo gut, like you can pretend it really is like goat leather or something. And my first problem was that I never really noticed before, but regular musical instruments have an angle here of 11 to 17 degrees that I did not know about until I made this. What can I do? Well, if you look at pictures of cigar box guitars online, you find they cheat. They use like a screw to hold down, which isn't working. And that's 2 eye hooks and a piece of a machine screw. But it made it playable. And Charlie Poole sang, my mother had 3 grown sons, Buster, Bill, and I. Buster was black sheep of our little family. My father tried to change him of his rough and rowdy ways. Finally had to pay the judge to give him 90 days, and then he rambled all around, in and out the town, and then he rambled till them butchers cut him down. Well, he went to the gambling, he gambled on the green, the gambler there showed him a trick that he'd never seen, etc. And he lost his money, lost his money, lost his jewelry, he lost his wife, he lost cart, carried it there, and somebody stole his wife. But then he rambled. At the end of the song, he falls into a barrel of slop. I was wondering, okay, if you go on, like you go to Amazon, you can get parts to anything, all the banjo parts you need. But it's very expensive to buy any kind of musical part that's made. You go to StewMac, multiply the price by 10. Okay, Bill is a victim of StewMac. He buys things from StewMac like I do. And I thought, well, there's got to be a cheap alternative to, the part of a banjo that's essentially a drum. So I looked online, I went to music stores, and I found this really cool Brazilian hand drum. And it was a very weak day. I was weak, and it was like $50. And I said, all right, I mean, it's for my education. As a luthier, I've been a Catholic all my life, and I suddenly want to become a luthier. And about the same time, we've been to the Guitar Center, and there was a Seagull Merlin Dulcimer Guitar, which Mark had, and I played it. It was so cool. And Beth decided she was going to learn to play a musical instrument, and so she'd been watching videos of some guy who broadcasts. Some days he's in China, other places no, but he's like missing home, and he plays his little Dulcimer guitar. I said, why don't I take that thing and trace where these frets were on it, and like take a piece of poplar and cut those lines in there, and order some frets and pound them in there, which I had no idea how hard that was going to be. And I'll attach it to this $50 Brazilian drum. And instead of a dowel, put a big lag screw through there. And I thought I solved my problem, but that didn't do it. So I still needed hooks. And then I had problems. The neck was too narrow. I couldn't. Anyway, this part is, I've been doing this for a year and a half. This part is still impossible. You think you have it, and it's not. And it's too late to take it apart. So. I thought that was the most irritating thing I'd ever heard in my entire life. So I gave it to Matthew Anderson, who thought it was a curiosity, and he said, "You're really giving this to me?" "Oh, yeah." And if somebody asked where you got to say, "I gave it to you. There were more to be bought." And the other day he dusted it off, said, "You really want to borrow this?" I said, "Yeah, I really do." But I learned a lot from making this. I learned about sawing and putting in frets, and it was harder than I thought, which prompted me then to go to StuMac and buy a miter saw and what do you call it?
Drill press?
Yeah,
the fret press.
The fret press. Each of those little fret things, they want $40 for it, but it matches the frets perfectly. And that's been fun. But I learned a lot doing that, so I gave it to Matt. I'd always wondered about the Dobro. I played banjo with the Dobro player, kept telling me to shut up one time, that I was too loud. But I still was pretty fascinated with the idea of the instrument. And I went online and saw that you could take a guitar, and this is a Resonator guitar. This started out as a Squire guitar. I bought it at the pawn shop for way too much money. And it has a resonator, and so it sounds metallic, and it's usually played with a slide, because you'd slice your fingers off if you try to play it any other way. And so I took this guitar and said, well, I can turn that, but wait a minute. But in the meantime, I won't play that yet. In the meantime, while I was waiting for this resonator to come from China, okay, it stayed in customs for 3 weeks in New Jersey, okay. I got to think, well, couldn't you make something? Couldn't you make something you could buy at Walmart or the Goodwill? And I got, dog bowls look like resonator cones. And man, I puzzled, like, how do I support it? How do I do it? And so I said, well, let's try it. I got a fork, okay? Saved myself $2 to use a fork. I knew that resonator guitars use heavy strings, so they have extra heavy necks, because you don't really hold it like this. And I still had not learned my lesson about 11 degree and 17 degree headstock. And so I said, well, heck, let me make a dog bowl dobro. you know something? Dog bowls are almost as expensive as resonators. And so the resonator came, and I took out my saber saw and I sawed a hole in a guitar. You cannot imagine how horrible a sound that is. It was like holding down a baby and doing an operation in the garage. It was just so horrible. And I got it in there, and I found out why Squier guitars are so much cheaper than regular Fender guitars. They're not made out of wood that you would have for anything. They take a piece of wood with holes in it, they fill in a putty that looks like ground up paper, put a heavy lacquer on it, and take, hey, this is a Fender guitar made God knows where. And so the soundboard of this thing was made out of plywood, and as I sanded it to get the whatever color it was yellow off, I found out I was exposing layers of plywood, and I was, oh no, what am I gonna do? I said, I will cover the whole thing in antiquing. Okay, so people say, I've never seen a guitar like you will never see. No one does this to a guitar. Okay, but I thought, well, it's a silver resonator and a gray guitar, and it came with all the parts. And then there was the original sound hole, and it turns out a coffee can lid fits there perfectly. And there was a trick I learned from repairing drywall. You take a piece of board and put it behind the hole, and you put your drywall over it, and then you put it, well, there's a piece of wood behind there that keeps that coffee can lid from falling inside and making a jangling sound. So, so I had a Dobro. By the time there was no room left in the living room, because there were two other Dulcimer guitars, thank God for brothers who think they're fascinating. Even gave one to the dean of the music school. He didn't know what to do about it, but I played Beethoven on it, so he took it. So I was pleased. One time at a party, he started singing Rolling Stones. Angie, Angel. Ooh, that's a Dobro song. All right, well, what I learned from making bad banjos, Mark has a bad one. I saw Beth went to the Daisy something or other at Stone Mountain, and somebody was selling the hell out of Appalachian banjos. And what it was a piece of wood with a practice drum pad screwed to it. And I was like, I wonder what that sound like, wonder what that sound like. And so I got busy with that and tried to do that scroll that a violin has on the end of it. It looked like, have you ever like taken bread? I'll make pretty shaping bread, and by the time you cook it, it's a big flat split. That's what my scroll looked like. So I knew Mark wanted it. So I left it in his office for the times when the days were just too rough. But I got really interested in, I said, problem with banjo is it's very loud, and for some people it's just irritating. Some people can't eat cilantro, I'm sorry for you, but some people just can't listen to banjo. And my daughter, for example, when I pull out, I didn't play the banjo for about 20 years. I had one, but I pull it out and I start playing with it, and my daughter would come into the living room going, stop it, stop it, stop it, that's so awful, stop it. And then she went to a girls' college and took folk music class, and she had to do a report, and she showed up. Can you play the banjo for me, and I'll do a video of it, and I'll interview you, and can I borrow it, and I learned to play some of it, can you show me, because I have to do it for my class. And I was like, oh, the music of your people. Yeah, I did it. And I met her teacher, and as I was joking with Bill and Mark earlier, I said, I met her teacher at a function, and she kept looking at me. What am I, like an exotic animal or a rock god? And Bill said, oh, a rock god. And Mark said, no, exotic animal. Because he saw her. She was like, you're the folk musician? It's like, yeah, I'm ignorant, lady. So I wanted a banjo that had a lower tone and didn't require me to figure out how to make a circle or pay $200 for a circle somebody else had made. And I had cut down a cherry tree in the front yard. The first thing I did was carve it into a bear with a chainsaw. And then I made some other things with the cherry, and I tried to make boards. I can make cherry boards. So I said, I'm going to make a cherry banjo. And I'll make it look like a balalaika. Okay, so I could make a triangle, but I couldn't make a circle. So, and I didn't know what to do about thin enough wood, so I put cherry veneer on it. Problem with cherry veneer is that it's very thin and it cracks. Okay, you have a cherry walking stick, very thin and it cracks all up. And so I tried to do my fancy cherry design on here, which just caused splits. And so there are pieces of ice cream stick glued under here to keep the splits from spreading. And but I really liked the sound. And it was tuned like a banjo, and then the first thing, of course, I lost my chord. The banjo broke, actually.
He is a rock god.
Keeps breaking. Well, anyway, actually a better Beatles song would be, when the rain comes, they run and hide their heads. They might as well be dead when the rain comes. When the rain comes, rain. I don't mind. Shine. The weather's fine. I don't know why that keeps jumping out. I'm hitting it too hard.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you. About that time, her cousin's husband invited us to Thanksgiving. He saw stuff on Facebook and he said, you know, I was going to build a guitar one time and I bought some wood to do it. You want it? And I'm like, yeah. What do you got? And he bam, he came back. He had a piece of Sitka spruce that was supposed to be a soundboard, and he had a beautiful piece of ebony. And I was like, oh, this is so beautiful, so beautiful. Thank you so much. And so I forget what I made something else out of it, but then I said, he said, make me a guitar. I said, okay, I'll make you a guitar. So I made a Dulcimer guitar, and you know, there's this whole tradition of cigar box guitars, but actually made from real cigar boxes. I never found a cigar box that was big enough or was worth fooling with, or was like cheap enough. So I make my own box, and so I put the spruce up here, and I happened to buy a cherry desk that I destroyed to make a workbench, and there was a drawer divider in there. And I said, you know, that fits perfectly. And so that went on the back. And I said, well, cigar box ought to have some Spanish on there. Puros del Sol, you know, cigars from the land of the sun, hecho en Cuba. And I bought a wood burner. And why not? And then the first thing I decided to play on it. Oh, I know what I did. These Dulcimer guitars are not all that versatile. You can't always distinguish a minor chord from a major chord depending on what key you're playing in, but it is versatile enough that you can play something like. Hotel California. Or you can play Beethoven on it. I don't know how many hours we got left, but then I want, yeah, what time? What is the time?
You just keep playing.
Oh,
2:40.
2:40, okay. I tried to get all these mandolins tuned, but they have, I never had a mandolin. I lived in a house one time, there was a homemade mandolin. And I just recently received a set of CDs of recordings made on a real thing at various parties in 1973, 74, and 76. And for the first 20 minutes of the first CD, I'm at a chili party, not talking, and I'm playing someone's violin with a pick, making the same obnoxious sound over and over and over again, with people going, "What's he doing, man? What's he doing?" It's like, that's like, what is that? What is it? I know that. What is that song? And I'm not answering because I just wasn't. And so I've never had a mandolin. I said, well, why don't I make a mandolin? And I said, well, while I'm at it, why don't I try to bend wood? Okay? So I cheated it. I used 2 layers of veneer. Veneer is about 1/16 inches thick, and it actually bends pretty well without heating or anything like that. I think I ended up having to heat this. I struggled with this, things broke. It looks like I had some more of that mahogany-looking plywood from that desk, and I cheated. I made an actual frame in that shape. And if you're really good, you don't do that. You make this piece and this piece, and you put that curving, which is a wood with a bunch of saw cuts in it. You bend it, and then you glue the side on, and it doesn't collapse. But I knew that wasn't going to happen for me. I took a hinge and made a tailpiece. I've yet to perfect the art of drilling multiple holes in a straight line, but I did some reading. No one can do that, actually. And then I didn't want to spend any money actually on a bridge, so I constructed one. I bought some templates, and about midway through sawing all these little lines and counting all those little frets, I said, this is ridiculous. I'm never going to do that again. And then I miscalculated on the headstock. I mean, these barely fit, and some of these you have to tune in the opposite direction. But I learned, and it actually played. And for about a month, I just sat there every night. And it worked. And when you played it, it felt a whole lot like a tomato slicer. It's a lot of little strings. But I've had a violin for 40 years. I most of the time didn't play because it made my ears hurt. But it gave me a lot of practice with. This is not tuned like a guitar. Usually I play guitar all my life, but learned to play the mandolin, and then I saw Balsam Range at the FPAC about a year ago, And the program said that one of the mandolin player was going to play an octave mandolin. The only thing he picked up was an electric 4-string mandolin sounding thing. And I went online and immediately found out I could not afford that instrument for all the joy it would bring me. So I got thinking about it and reading about mandolas and octave mandolins. And I thought, wouldn't that be interesting? And so I had another round of wood bending. This time I paid Stumac for bending wood. It doesn't really bend any better than any other kind of wood, but it's $40 for a package of it. But I finally got together. This is maple. I discovered the Rockler store. Don't ever go in there because you'll, like, all your money will go to Rockler. And they said, oh, these are like cheap pieces of extra wood. Not if you just like fill your truck up. I mean, if we ever like have a bad storm, we got enough firewood for 6 months and enough coffee from Costco to make up for that. So I knew I could draw one of these curves, but I wasn't sure I could make it match. You could fold the paper, but you never get what you want. And I said, you know, I've been thinking about why don't I make a musical instrument out of a trout net? And a trout net, you know, a scoop net. It's this shape. You catch one and you go like this. And so I looked at the trout net I had and said, all I need to do is find 2 trout nets. I've got the perfect shape. So I went to Cabela's and bought 2 trout nets and for $20. And I mutilated them, cut them up, and they form a frame here and here. This is 2 trout nets. There is more wood in here than any sane luthier would put, but I didn't want it to fall apart. I mean, it weighs way too much. I invested in an actual tailpiece made by a manufacturer and bought a real bridge that was adjustable. And I got it all together, and I thought, wouldn't this be really neat to have this part of the fingerboard above this? Well, in 2 days, it was like this. It had curled. And so I said, I'll put some attractive screws in there. It's really ugly. And I said, well, hell, I'm just learning. And this time, I got the spacing correct. I got my angle in there. And I played this for several months. Much deeper than that's loud. Okay. And then one day I saw an ad for a beautiful little curved hand plane. I said, oh God, it was beautiful. It was made out of maple and brass and stainless steel. And it was only $180. And all I had to do was just hit click, and it would be here. And I waited and waited and waited, and it came from Stumac, and I got a package that was this big and didn't weigh anything, and it was a package of 7.5-inch radius frets worth $8. And I usually don't call people on the phone because I hate it. I called Stumac. Where the hell is my plane that costs $180? You just sent me this $8 pack. Oh, sir, you can have those. Well, thank you. Where is it? So I got it in a couple of days. Most wonderful thing that ever happened to me. Those frets are so wonderful. I buy hundreds of dollars of those frets. They're magnificent. I changed the radius and I regretted it. And I'm sticking with 7.5-inch radius frets. So anyway, I decided, wow, why don't I, because my first experience with mandolin playing was playing a fiddle with a pick, and no alcohol was involved. And I said, why don't I make like a violin body, okay? And so I said, I forgot I had a violin. I could have traced it, but I went online and I printed out on an 8.5 by 11-inch page a violin shape. And I got it all cut out, and it's like, wait, this is the wrong size. What is this? So I turned it into an electric mandolin violin and bought like $8 electronic pickups and stuff for it. It is the hottest little number you have ever heard. I mean, it is like, and Mark said, I want one of those. I said, you can have this one because I'm going to be thrown out of this house if I keep playing this with all these effects from the electric guitar amp. So any dead people at Mark's house, it must have been caused by that mandolin. But I said, well, I continued, and I got the actual size. Wow, to make a violin, you got to curve a piece of wood here, you got to curve a piece here, and here, and here. And this is way thicker than it should be, but this started out as a piece of spruce about that thick. It was about this long and this high. And I had to cut it at an angle. It was 6 inches tall, so I had no saw that would do that. I wasn't going to spend $2,000 to buy a decent band saw to do it. Then I'd cut my arm off. So I bought a new hand saw, first time in 30 years. Every 30 years you need to buy a new one. And so I sawed that thing at an angle. It took me a week to saw both sides of that. Each side, like 2 weeks total. And then you glue it together. And so it's higher naturally in the middle, and then you take a plane with a curved blade, and you work this and work this and work this and work this and work this until it has a shape. I gave up finally, and I used a belt sander. But then I was afraid to get it too thin, and there is a sound peg in there, and it wasn't the right, it wasn't the right curve to match a mandolin thing. But I did buy another tailpiece. And I really enjoyed this instrument. Yeah, people go, what's wrong with that violin? And I thought for a while, yes, I'm going to go on to cellos. I'm going to buy a cello playing. I said, no, I'm not. Well, one day I woke up and said, my God, I still need a banjo. I want to build a real banjo. I just need a drum head. And I went online, where can I get a drum head, a used drum head? And so I said to Beth, well, let's just go to Goodwill. Maybe there's a drum set. 1999, it was a kid's drum set, like a snare drum, a tom-tom, a bass drum that would be way too big for a banjo, and a bunch of metal stuff. And this is it, this is it, this is it. So I took the snare drum, took it all apart, and then with the technique I'd used to saw the salad bowl, I cut the snare drum in two. And I made two banjos, and by the time I learned about C tuning, and well, when I first made it, it sounded like this. And I could not stand that. It was like so sad. I worked it, it sounds so awful. And then I saw on Clawhammer Banjo on Facebook that people stick their handkerchiefs in the back. And so I had an old sock. And with an old sock,
Yeah, it makes all the difference. For the sock.
This one had a problem with measurement, and it started to bend when I put it together. So I took a dowel, cut the dowel in half, and pounded it in there with a hammer. And unless I take off all the strings, it's never going to have a problem. And I made a longer one, and I learned other things like if you make a bad measurement, just add layers of wood. It looks pretty. This is mesquite. I got it at Rockwell. They had a bunch of mesquite out. I actually barbecued with the scraps and remnants. I was wondering what to do about, you know, from the fifth fret on, because of the fifth string, this part of the neck is wider, and they're just I have just problems with cutting anything in a straight line, so I wasn't sure what to do. So I saw that some banjo makers just make this part wider than the neck, and it was much easier than trying to like shape this the way my bought banjo was. For doweling, I had a what is that? A piece of mahogany. There's another oak stair railing, the spacer I needed. I abandoned the idea of a screw all the way through, and I did like that. There's a screw stuck in here and then a screw here. I made this out of a piece of a banjo tailpiece, and I think that's a drawer pull. I'm not sure. I measured wrong, of course, and I had to shave off a lot of the bottom of that little bridge. But I was really pleased. Now, I decided to buy a lathe, and I'm still alive. I broke 3 gouges, blew up a bowl. It took trying to cut the inside of a straight bowl was much harder than I thought it could be. And at one point, it took this big tool out of my hand, threw it up, and hit the face mask I was wearing. I thought it was funny, but like it could have been stuck in the top of my head. There was a tool about that long. It was and all I did was laugh, and then she was not in use or there. And I decided, you know, I lived outside of Philadelphia one time, and some people I knew, they were in mummers bands, like 24 banjo players, and they play 4-string banjos. I'd never been around a 4-string banjo. I had trouble tuning this earlier. But anyway, I made this bowl. The first one I tried to make was from a guy saying, "You people are all just sissies. This is how you make a bowl." And he glued like 4 2x4s together in a square, and this like, that's how you make a banjo pie. And I said, well, I could do better than that, especially since that one blew up and did not injure me. So I took layers, and how many I made? I got 1, 2. Yeah, this was like squares glued together, and then I cut them and cut the inside and put them on the lathe and then tried to smooth them out. I got it way too thin, so it wasn't very strong. But I made 2 of these this way. The other one was stronger, but I thought this one was very pretty. As soon as I put strings on it, it started pulling itself apart. So we went to Michael's and got an embroidery hoop and glued it on there, and it has quit falling apart. That's something wrong there. Shooting flies. But this tuned like a mandolin or a fiddle in fifths, and this is tuned like a viola. It's supposed to be like C, G, D, A. Oh, that's really awful. I'm sorry. I made two of them. I traded one to Dennis McIntyre, former dean of School of Performing Arts, and he gave me a Microsoft, which God, I've just used and used and used and used and used, but it was a good trade. And then we're running out of time. Then I finally did what I should have done earlier, and that is I spent some money. So I bought about $60, $80 worth of rosewood. I paid about $200 for the hardware. And I took my time, and I made this pot out of octagonals of rosewood, poplar, and rosewood. That's something like 24 holes you got to drill, and they got to be in the right place, but mine aren't. But then I see that people create all kind of jigs for that. I ended up with a walnut. I started using walnut for fingerboards, and I ended up playing this at a wedding. The bride wanted mountain chic.
Mountain chic.
Mountain chic, I think she called it. So I wore a suit and I played banjo music. And she wanted to hear like old-time folk music like Simon and Garfunkel and Neil Young. I said, oh yeah, those are the old-time guys. I'm not kidding.
New person. Yeah.
I played that at the wedding. The other one was because I'm still in love with you. Wait, hold on. Dancing all night through. 'Cause I'm still in love with you. On this harvest moon. That's old-timey music. People almost 30 years old. But I actually love this banjo. It's not quite a tune now, but it's 12 inches across. Most banjos are 11, and I wanted a 12-inch banjo. I had heard a video of was a Deering Americana Good Time banjo, and I finally found some in person, and it still sounded good, but God, they were so cheaply made. I was like, I can do better than this. I can certainly spend more money. And so I made this, and you know, people have picked it up. Hey, you made a new banjo, and it's like, what is that glorious sound? I've never heard that sound come out of a banjo, but it's got very nice bass tones. Got this here old banjo, strung it up with twine. The only song that I can sing is Trouble on My Mind, boys, trouble on my mind. I went down to Lynchburg, fetched me a bottle of wine. They tied me to the whipping post and gave me 99, boys, gave me 99. Well, I went back to Lynchburg, give me a bottle of beer. Wait, no, a bottle of gin. Tied me to the whipping post and gave me hell again. Gave me hell again. Don't go to Lynchburg. Well, I decided it was time. I decided it was time to actually make a real dulcimer, and I got in touch with this weird guy in Pennsylvania called the Bear Mountain Dulcimer Company. And he measures things to within a thousandth of an inch, and he sends you like math formulas when you to prove that he did his work. And so I ordered a template from him. And it took 10 days on the phone to get the order straight, and it came and it wasn't straight. First off, it didn't make any sense. This was not the fingering on the Dulcimer guitar we had. But I went online and said, oh, and then I had counted actual frets when I ordered it, and you don't count actual frets, you count imaginary frets. Okay, so this guy, and I had like about 6 weeks of going back and forth, and then he replaced my template. And but this was from the first template I had, so it's kind of shorter. I've been looking at dulcimers in a store in Gatlinburg. It's a very curious store. You can go in and they'll play with you and then try to talk you into like lessons, like you play jazz chords on your dulcimer if you want. So this is made out of ash and what's it called? Purple heart. And this is really pretty. I could do this bending without putting a piece of wood in the microwave for 10 minutes. That's what I learned with this. By the way, the best way to bend wood is soak it overnight and put it in the microwave for 10 minutes. You can tie a shoelace knot with it. Well, I've kept you too long on this rainy afternoon, but I finally decided to try a guitar. And I had seen a Martin backpack guitar with metal strings, and I thought, ooh, I don't see an acoustic classical backpack guitars. There are some backpack guitars, but they're electric. And they have very, very thin bodies. And I got to think, well, why don't I make one? Well, the problem was I did not have a classical guitar template. Classical guitars have a smaller template for the frets than a banjo. But I had a banjo template, and I said, well, I'll just use the damn banjo template. What harm could that cause? Well, if you're a classical guitar player, it's like, my fingers can't stretch that far. So I got to working on it, and I learned a lot. I bend wood, and Mark taught me that if your neck is too fat, he'll tell you that your neck is too fat. So I was able to get this one down to 7/8 of an inch. The first headstock I made was too narrow. It did not work. So I made a wider one and connected it, and it started to come off when I put the strings on. So I had to do emergency surgery on it and put wood screws through there. And this is why they make these little caps to hide screws that you don't really want there. And I had measured perfectly, and this ready-made bridge was perfect over here, but I had not noticed that it actually is angled and drops, and so it was off by 3/16 of an inch here. So I just happened to have a piece of Purple Heart that was 3/16 of an inch and included on there. And I just got this made like last week, and I took it to Matthew Anderson, our resident classical guitarist. He didn't know how to hold it. I said, just do it like the guy in Picasso's Blue Guitar Player, and he said, I'll have to. It's quiet enough that we can watch TV and she doesn't tell me to shut up, unless she's working on her taxes. She hates my mama, she hates my daddy too. She loves to tell me She hates the things I do. She loves to lie beside me almost every night. Said, that ain't no lady, that's my wife. Not this wife. The preacher asked her, and she said, I do. The preacher asked me. She said, yes, well, hell, he does too. The preacher pronounced the 99 to life. Said, that ain't no lady, that's your wife. I can't remember how I met her. Seems like she's always been hanging here on my right arm. I can't remember how I ever thought that I couldn't live without a woman's charm. And even though she walks around in them high-heeled shoes, and even though she loves the smell of that French perfume, all I know is I'm the one that has to pay her price. Said, that ain't no lady, that's my wife. Well, thank you for coming out. Lutheranism, whatever it is, Luthering is turning out to be a very expensive hobby. But I am enjoying it, and I'm facing retirement. I have plenty to do. Although, Lord knows I'll go on to something else at some point. Gun stocks or something. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
How much time do you have in
Well, I work all day, and some days I can get away a little early, but usually I can't deal with this after supper. And my arms get tired, so there's the limit that my body can do. And then so much of this is like gluing and going away. And then come back and gluing or putting a stain on and going away, and putting more stain on and going away. Or, it takes a whole evening to get it strung the first time, and it's very nerve-wracking. But I generally get an hour a day in the evening, and sometimes a little bit in the morning before I have to come in. And then, depending on how much yard work or home remodeling has to be going on the weekend, get more time. But in the middle of this week, we remodeled the house. People did the hard work, but we went to Home Depot every day for 6 months, usually returning something. But yeah, just a little bit. That's the way anything is. If you want to write a book, write 2 pages a day, and in a year you've got 700-something pages, 730 pages. But some days it's hard to write those 2 pages. But that's how you get through
I
complicated.
have a question. I have serial box knowledge of a banjo. So some of the terms you used, what is a dobro?
A
How do you-
Dobro
what
is
is it?
actually a brand name
Oh.
of
All I can
the
think of
Dobro
is
brothers.
Merlin.
And the National Guitar Company also makes Resonator guitars, but no one's, I'm going to buy a National, just say I want a Dobro. But I noticed on Bluegrass Junction, the DJs are trying to quit saying Dobro he's a Dobro player, he's a Resonator guitar player. But it's a brand name
Oh, okay.
for Resonator guitar. And it's just a guitar there's a cone under here, and the bridge sits at the top of the cone. So there's a metallic sound to it, and some of them are actually made completely out of metal. And some have strings low enough you can play them like a regular guitar. And then Brett Mullick's has got one where you can change the bridge and use a slide or use your fingers. I'm not sure when they first appeared, in the 1920s or so, 1930s. But you hear them regularly in bluegrass music, occasionally in country western music, depending how acoustic the things are. But generally, you get the same sound in country music with either lap steel or a pedal steel. And these days you don't hear those really much at all. But it's associated with all the, it's not put on the Bluegrass Channel, and she says, I can't take it. Every time there's a dog, it dies. And every time there's a wife, they kill her and put her in the backyard. And so she says, can't we put on something else? Put on Willie's Roadhouse. It's the adultery and alcoholism channel. And it's just people who just get so drunk they can't go home to the right woman. But in those old, those old 50s and 60s country music, there's a lot of steel guitar. Merle Haggard's always got them. That was a good question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the Dobro brothers are like Kleenex and Coke,
How do you spell that?
D-R,
Kleenex and
D-O-B-R-O. Yeah, well, Kleenex,
Oh, Kleenex.
Kleenex is a brand name, but people use it to refer to facial tissues. And in the South, you want a Coke,
I got it.
which they've registered as a trademark. Okay, other parts of the country, you want a Coke, but that's all you drink is Coke? No, I like Sprite Coke, and I like Grape Coke. Well, it used to have cocaine in it, that's why it was so effective. I was just saying they used to, what is it, the Hunter Museum in Chattanooga, owned by a Coca-Cola distributor. I said, my God, this is what cocaine can do for you. Just put it in a bottle with bubbles.
Well, will you be able to stick around for a minute in case people have questions?
Yeah.
We give one more round of applause.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for coming, and hopefully if you come next Thursday, we'll have Dr. Kitchens with the Scots Irish. So thank you very much.